Welcome to Freddie's Huge Ask Podcast. Huge lives and the stories behind them.
3, 2, 1.
And now here's your host, Freddie Cruz.
Hayley Campbell writes for Wired, Buzzfeed, The Guardian, and Vice, among many, many others. She's written a book about Neil Gaiman, and her new book, All the Living and the Dead, tackles something many of us in the West struggle with, and that is death, because we're all going to die. Hayley joins the pod right now. Hello.
Hello. Is that news to you that we're all going to die? Or is that...
Well, someone I'm very, 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 very close with works in the death industry.
Oh.
Going back to you, because this is it's such a beautiful tribute to people whose careers involve making a living off of people dying, and it's a very interesting dichotomy. But for you, it seems like you were always surrounded by death. Going back to your father, who you write about in the book at the very beginning.
Yeah, my dad is a cartoonist. His name's Hayley Campbell, and he did a book called From Hell with Alan Moore. And if anyone's read that, and many people have, they will know that it's very, very gory. It's about Jack the Ripper. And so he took about 10 years to do this book, from the age I was 3 to the age I was 13. And he had reference pictures up on his drawing board, autopsy pictures, crime scene pictures. And when I was a kid, I wasn't frightened of them, and they weren't unusual. I just wanted to know all about them and what happened. And so at home, death was kind of not that strange, not that unusual to ask questions about. But outside of the house, in school, and especially in church, because I went to a Catholic school, if you asked practical questions about, what happens to the body when it goes in the ground, who looks after it, nobody would really give me a proper answer. And I think as soon as you tell a kid, or not even tell them, as soon as you give them some kind of vibe that this is secret and they shouldn't know about it, I think that is the perfect way to foster some kind of preoccupation, which is exactly what happened with me. And also with my dad, I thought all dads were doing this. All dads were sitting at home drawing pictures of dead ladies. I didn't realize until I went to other people's houses, and I was like, where's your dad? And it turned out everybody else's dads were rarely in the house because they were accountants, they were lawyers, and mine was at home drawing pictures. But you know how little kids play shop and they try and, emulate their parents. I sat beside him. You can see where this is going. I sat beside him on a little table, and I pretended to be a cartoonist myself, and because I thought that's what adults did. So I drew my own book of all the ways a human being could die violently. And I still have it because my dad kept all these pages. He's like some kind of Gomez Adams. He was showing them off proudly to guests. And, there's people being cut up with machetes, people being left hanging for the birds to eat.
What does a little girl's version of a machete even look like?
It's a pretty good machete, because I just seen Gorillas in the Mist. This was when I was 7, by the way.
Oh God! So you were starting to have that control of your hand, the hand control, the hand-eye coordination, that you can draw a sharp-looking machete, and it doesn't look like, oh, is that a rock? No, it's a machete. Oh no,
you could
definitely.
You could tell it was a machete rather than any other kind of knife. That's how good it was. I'm in hindsight, maybe I was a weird little kid, but I think I was just a kid who had a lot of questions. And when I grew up and became a journalist, I realized that I can exploit my position to ask those questions. So that's pretty much what the book is.
Yeah. Well, okay. I've got so many questions.
You and my therapist.
Well, and one of the people you wrote about in the book, I think, triggered you going to a therapist, if I remember correctly. And we can talk about this if you want, the baby.
I didn't go to a therapist. No, I just wallowed in my weird
trauma. I'm misremembering.
I tried to figure it out through writing.
You talked to a lot of people about it.
Yeah, I used people. I used the the subsequent interviews as a kind of free therapy,
Mm.
because so the baby that you mentioned is something that I saw when I had gone to see an adult autopsy, and it was in a pediatric pathology specialist unit as well. So I was warned before I went in that you might see dead children. We don't know the schedule, but it's possible. And
And I'm sorry to interrupt. If you're listening to this podcast, you're being forewarned right now, because this is,
yeah,
yeah, this is something.
it was a lot. So I was watching this adult autopsy, which is a fascinating thing to see. You know, the fact that we are just meat in a big bag. It astounds me that any of this works. So I was watching that, but in the corner, um, a pathologist was taking apart a little baby who was suspected of being killed by its mother, and there were policewomen there, and they were, you know, watching on, because that's what happens in a forensic autopsy. um, but while the autopsy was going on, it all sort of made sense. And obviously no one wants to see a dead baby or a baby being taken apart, but it made sense that in that room everyone was doing their job. It was later, when the baby was all stitched up and they were just washing him in a little tub. You know, it was like a little bubble bath in the sink. And it just looked so much like how my mother used to wash my little sister, that it really shook me. And it took me weeks to figure out why I was feeling like that. And I think it's because life isn't supposed to surface in the mortuary. And it did. It looked like a little domestic scene rather than biology and science. And I think that's what got to me. And, you know, the women who work doing the autopsies, they told me that a way of separating themselves emotionally from what they're doing is they really prefer it when the bodies are cold, when they've been in the fridges for a long time, even though it's physically painful for their fingers to be inside cold meat. It freaks them out if somebody's come down from upstairs in the hospital and hasn't had time to cool in the fridges, because warm bodies are live bodies, and that's not what they're used to. But as a way
Mhm.
of dealing with this, I went and spoke to a bereavement midwife, who's a midwife who delivers stillborns or babies who aren't going to live very long. And I had no idea that her job existed.
Me
So
neither.
it's a fascinating job, and you really only learn about these people if you yourself are about to lose a baby, and then you become part of this secret, you know, club. It's I don't I've had friends lose babies, stillborns and miscarriages, and they'll mention it and then rarely mention it again. It's like nobody knows how to talk about it. And I think in exploring why I fell apart in seeing this baby, um, you know, I think it was learning about that job, and Claire Beasley, who is the bereavement midwife, taught me a lot more about what they were going through, and now I have a lot more empathy for it, rather than just, you know, shock and sadness. I can kind of see more of what they went through. So it was really important. She wasn't my official therapist, but she does that job because she went through a similar trauma of dealing with a dead baby, and she realized that there was something she could do, like your family member. And I think it's so heroic when people act on that, and they do.
Absolutely. And in reading that passage, Haley, it it made me sad, because here we have a baby, and you talk about the baby in the tub, and then it's like you're juxtaposing that with a baby that was being sliced up for an autopsy, and it's like, what's it's still a human. The baby is a human. But for me as a reader, experiencing your experience, it's the baby didn't even get to experience all these wonders that you and I get to experience.
Yeah.
Here I'm 47, and I got to live through all of these things, like every single thing. Like, I got to read your book. I got to not only read your book, but go on a run this morning and feel raindrops on my head and kiss my dog and open up a fresh bottle of water and just little things that these tiny bodies will never even know. And
Yeah.
that to
Well,
me was just painful.
well, I think the most like the thing that has stuck with me the most throughout all of these interviews and experiences is I think I'm now more conscious of time because I've seen, as you say, little babies who didn't get any. The one I saw got 2 weeks, and I've seen the bodies of an old woman who was 105. So everybody gets a lifetime, but there's no saying how long it is. And So now I'm more conscious of time. I say no to a lot more things, things that you would previously I would have done out of some kind of feeling like I had to. Now I go, no one will miss me. And also I've stopped arguing with people on the internet because we literally do not have time for that.
Well, you and I will agree on that, but there are a lot of people who disagree.
I know, and there are a lot of people who are wrong on the internet, and we just need to ignore them.
Well, it depends, Hayley. I mean, they could all be right for all we know, and we're the ones that are wrong. Oh, but you go back to time, and it's something that you wrote in the book that 6,324 people die every hour, and I mentioned my run. That's more than 57 minutes on the trail. That's more than 57 people who died on this planet while I was running. Yeah. And then if you run the math, if you watch 2 hours of Netflix every day, I mean,
yeah, people are dying all the time, everywhere. Yeah. And the thing that I wanted to explore in this book is the fact that when they die in America and the UK, their bodies disappear. And the way I put it in the book is it's like in video games, when you shoot someone, the body kind of fades away. And I wanted to know where it goes, who looks after it. And so I charted, so somebody dies in a deathbed and then they are cremated or buried. And I wanted to look at all the hands that it passes through. And when you get, I had a big, pin board out, like I was a detective solving a murder. When you do that, it passes through so many people. And we don't really pay attention to who those people are and what they're doing. And the other thing is that we can be there for some of the things. And now having seen them, I think that, I've become kind of evangelical about telling people you should be there to do this, like dressing the dead body. I'm now encouraging people to do that. And you can be at the crematorium if you want to. And I don't want people to read this book and think I'm telling them that they have to do things or this is how you should feel about a dead body. I don't even want them to come away thinking that I've told them that dead bodies are less frightening than they think they are, because I can't tell you what your fears are. But I think the knowledge of what these people do and the fact that you now know that you can be there for some of it is kind of empowering, because you can make up your own mind after that.
Yeah, and the quote that I have been pondering the most from the book is the first dead body you see should not be someone you love. And for me, I've thought about how maybe an obsession with horror movies, and I'm an 80s kid, so I was in grade school, and I don't know what was wrong with my mom that she would let me watch Friday the 13th and Halloween, but I don't know if this obsession might have made viewing deceased loved ones less traumatic, keeping in mind the first major death in my family wasn't until I was several years out of high school, 21 or 22. So there wasn't very much death in my youth, not like with my children, unfortunately or fortunately. I mean, we all, this is something that we all have to experience. But yeah, it was less traumatic seeing that for the first time.
Yeah,
it was
because
more
of horror movies.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange to me though.
What was it? Because seeing the dead body was kind of an anticlimax, given what you imagine dead bodies to be from the horror movies?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, or then again, it was just peace, knowing that he was basically enduring hell on earth in his last few months, and it was over. And so seeing him like that was you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of death in my life. When I was 13, one of my good friends drowned in a creek. And the thing with funerals in Australia and the UK is that we don't really have a tradition of seeing the dead body. Um, the open coffin funerals are things that happen in American films. Um, Here you have to specially ask to go and see the body, and you'd go to the funeral home, and it would be before the funeral, and it's just close family, really. And so I had friends die. I had one when I was 13, one when I was 15. I've had friends commit suicide, and I haven't seen any of their bodies when they've been dead. I've had grandparents die, and I still haven't seen them. So the first dead body I saw was when I was writing this book. And it was that funeral director, Poppy, the one who said the first dead body you see shouldn't be someone you love. She invited me to come to her funeral home to help dress a dead man for his coffin. And this was, I was interviewing her, and I was trying to push my luck, really. I said, I'd never seen a dead body, and can you show me one? And she said, well, we're not a museum, but if you want to come back and help dress someone, you can do that. And it was incredible. It was this profound experience of dressing this complete stranger, and I had a lump in my throat the whole time, and it felt really special to be there for someone's last moments. He was being cremated the next day, so his body was no longer going to exist. And it felt to me like when you do a kid's shoelaces up at the school gates and then just send them on their way, it's the last thing you can do for them, and then it's out of your hands. So now I just really want to be there for family funerals. There was a documentary about Amy Winehouse that came out last year, I think, and I was watching it, and it was they were interviewing her best friends, and her best friends said that they had dressed her for her coffin. Dolce and Gabbana had donated a leopard print dress for her to be buried in, and her best friends dressed her in it. And I remember watching Twitter at the time, and people were going, "Oh, that's disgusting. Oh, why would you do that?" And I had so recently dressed this other guy that I thought, I know exactly why you're there. It's special. And not only is it special, do you feel like you're helping someone, but it's helping you come to terms with the reality of what's just happened. Because otherwise, it's just death is an idea and an absence of a person rather than something that's actually happened. I think maybe it's a quirk with me. I'm very curious, but also I have to see things with my own eyes to believe them. And so I find it helpful. Other people might not.
Yeah. And the part of, I think it was after you dressed him where you said, I'm the last woman that'll feel his touch, or that he'll
Yeah.
hold or something. Or
Yeah.
I forget the exact line,
I
but I'm
was
like, yeah,
positioning his head on the
that's
pillow, and I was like,
profound.
yeah. And I don't know that man. Um, uh, and our lives somehow intertwined, and I was the last person to hold his head before he was cremated. I think that's profound.
Absolutely. It also gives you this heightened sense of awareness, and it almost makes you feel okay. So that part, and then what you just said, reminds me of Robert Greene's book, The Laws of Human Nature, where he's pondering our sense of mortality, and he talks about how you are, and I'm going to butcher this, but I'm paraphrasing the passage where he talks about being on a busy street in a city, and you look at everybody around you and know that in 99 years you're all going to be dead.
Yeah.
But it gives you what you talk about is like, okay, but this is a very intimate moment, and we're all people just trying to figure things out the best we can.
Yeah. I think I'm a little less angry or less impatient with people now, because I don't know, I came away with the feeling that it's so uh, unlikely that we're all alive, still alive, and it's so um, brief. straight after I was at the funeral home dressing that man, I went to the gym, which I used to do before COVID. I used to do very frequently as a way of kind of quietening my brain. And I became so conscious of the fact that everyone around me was breathing and making noise because I had just been in a mortuary with everybody
Oh God.
quiet. And
Yeah.
it was a real shock. Like I've tried to capture it in the book, but the shock, it was such a gear change to go from the quiet mortuary to the gym where everyone is just, you know, it, and everyone, there was heat emanating off people. I became far more conscious of the fact that everyone was, moving and alive and breathing.
And you talk about how we're essentially just meat suits, and how is any of this even possible? And you see this dead human, and you're experiencing it, and you're wondering these thoughts, and then you go and you're okay. There's the proof: hot, sweaty bodies, hot, sweaty meat suits.
But now that I've seen autopsies, I see these hot, sweaty meat suits, and I know what's inside them. So I
Yeah.
kind of picture people not naked, but like without skin. I can see what is in them. It's like a like
Like the
a
anatomy
kind of,
figure, right?
yeah. It's like I'm Terminator and I'm seeing this like different thing over everybody. It was a very straight. It's kind of worn off a little bit, but in the days after these events, it was a real, it made my mind go all screwy.
Okay, so how compacted were all these trips to these different places? Because you went to the Cryonics Institute, you dressed the dead body, you went to the place where they did the mortuaries, you talked with an executioner. So how spaced out were all these trips that you had all these thoughts that you were working out after the fact?
I think they were about, so all of them took about a year and a half to do. They weren't
I'm sorry,
equally
each?
spaced out. No, like all of them, all the travel was
Okay.
within a
Like the
year and a half, and
combined.
then
Gotcha.
yeah. So some of them were a little more close together than others, but mostly I gave myself a chance to kind of sit and think because I think if I missed a lot of deadlines. Initially, I said, "Oh yeah, I can get this book done in a year." When I sold the proposal, I had done none of the interviews. Um, and that was very, very cocky of me. And I had to beg for 2 or 3 extensions because I was not, Mike Tyson said everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And there were so many
Yep.
moments where I was like, I need a lot more time to process this and what's just happened, including after the baby, where I just went to bed for 3 weeks and did nothing. Um, so yeah, I think it's hilariously naive of me to think I could have done this book in a year. This book took me 3 years to do, and and even that felt like I was really up against it in terms of, it is such a thing to try and reckon with, death, um, and what I've seen. So yeah, I couldn't have
And that's
done it in
because you've been
any.
around it since you were a little girl.
Well, not dead bodies. I've been around the idea
Well,
of
the
it,
idea of
and I've
death.
been
Yes,
thinking about
yes,
it for a
yes.
long, long time. So it felt like I was finally getting to see everything that I had wanted to see.
Right.
I, like you, I grew up watching horror movies. I grew up when the internet was in its infancy. I first got the internet when I was 12 or 13, and one of the first places I went was rotten.com to try and find pictures of, this was around the time when my friend died, and I just wanted to know what like a normal dead body looked like. And all I could find on the internet was horrible, decomposed murder pictures, the kind of pictures that are taken from a police file that somebody's uploaded on the internet. And I'm not the only kid who spent their lives looking at rotten.com. I think that was a formative website for lots of people who were on the internet in the late 90s. It was where we went. And I don't think it prepared me for properly for a dead body, because I found a dead body when I finally saw one, to be kind of an anticlimax, because the overwhelming feeling was just sadness. Like, this was just this vulnerable dead person. There was nothing frightening about them at all. And I've spent, I don't know how many hours looking at rotten.com, which is still there, by the way. It's on the Wayback Machine. So
Oh
if no one,
God.
if you weren't looking at it in the late 90s, you can still have a look. Although I wouldn't recommend it.
Nobody get mad at me, but similar to your experience with rotten.com, I may have gone to that website, but we rented. Okay, y'all, please don't hate me. We went out and rented. So this takes a lot more effort than just punching in a website. We went out and rented video cassettes of Faces of Death.
I knew you were going to say Faces of Death. I knew it.
Yeah, and yeah, yeah.
Well, there are even, the museums. There's the Museum of Death in LA, and there's one in New Orleans. And I've been to both of them as an adult, even though I know they're kind of tacky. And they've got little theaters, like backroom theaters, where they're playing horrible videos of, genocide and war and the kind of videos that would be on rotten.com, and they play on a loop, and you sit there until you can't take it anymore, and then you leave. But this is the way that death is kind of given to us. You're never shown normal, boring death. You're shown it in its most horrific way if you seek it out. And if someone you love dies here, you're not shown it at all. It's just the idea. So all I wanted to do was go and see what it's like, and then try and show people as kind of an antidote to all of that tacky stuff, the spooky stuff. And I really wanted my book to not come out at Halloween, because I said, this is, dead bodies aren't just for Halloween. Dogs aren't just for Christmas. This is for everyone. And another thing is, I don't want just people like me to read this book, because it's kind of preaching to the converted. I would really like it if people read this book who don't have a big library of death books like I do, and who haven't spent their lives on the internet looking for dead bodies. People who think, that's not for me, I'm not really thinking about it. I would love to know what they think.
It might even help with, I
think so.
And I say might. I think it would absolutely help, because I'm nowhere near your level of acceptance of the inevitable, but I will say that I'm comfortable. Like I talk a big game where, it's like, I accept the fact that, there could be somebody texting and driving, arguing with somebody on the internet on their smartphone, and splat, I'm dead on impact because of this jackass. I could accept it. But then I think really long and hard, do you really accept that? You would be so sad. And then I get sad, and then I start crying.
I don't think anyone wants to die unless you're
I don't think any of us
pain.
wants to die. We can accept it, though.
I know I will die. I don't want to. The bit I don't look forward to is the dying. But the thing I'm not frightened of is the death, because I'm not religious in any way. I don't. 12 years of Catholic school really turned me off that. You
are not the first person to say that.
I know.
And I'm a Catholic. I didn't go to Catholic school. I'm lucky.
Yeah, they have a certain way of doing it. But yeah, I don't want to go through the dying process, but it's the death bit that I'm okay with, because I think there will be nothing. I think it's nothing. It's literally nothing to be frightened of.
Yeah, because there was nothing before you came into this world. Like, all the things that we missed.
Yeah.
Like, literally everything we missed that we read about in the books, everything in history that you read about in your research of for this book, and the Revolution, the British Civil War, Jesus on Earth, all the Egyptian Empire, the Mayans, the Incans. We missed all of it, and we're not going to miss anything that happens in the future after we're gone.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of freeing.
I think it is too.
The idea of hanging around and still being able to see what's going on or still being able to talk to people, that to me sounds frightening. You know, being able to see a world without you in it, that would be more frightening to me than completely going blank.
Yeah. And not to get religious, but you went to Catholic school, I'm Catholic, and they talk about the mystery of faith, or it's like a mystery, life is a mystery, and I'm gonna go ahead and make a generalization. I'm guessing there's some sort of that component in whatever spiritual practice somebody partakes in. But life is a mystery, to quote
Madonna said so.
And what fun is it to be able to experience everything? I mean, I don't know. That seems boring to me. It's like being a vampire. You get to live thousands of years.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Well, I think I've read too many vampire novels to think that living forever is anything good, which is partly why I went to go and talk to the cryonics people as well, which was, I thought, would be an interesting end to the book, to meet all of these people who have accepted death as a finality and something that you can't avoid. I thought, I want to go and meet the people who think you can avoid it. And I know everything I knew about cryonics, I knew from watching Austin Powers or Futurama. And so I was expecting to go there and just find crazy people who were like, yeah, we're freezing everyone. We're all going to come alive in 2,000 years and it's going to be amazing. But what I found was just these kind of sweet nerds who didn't fully believe that this would all happen, and that this was definitely possible. They were just saying, well, we don't know it isn't possible. This is just kind of an experimental group. And we know what happens to the control group. They get buried or burned and they're not coming back. But we're in this big experiment and maybe we'll get to come back in the future when technology advances. Maybe we won't, but you're not going to lose anything by freezing a body. And I thought that was really honest of them. And I also thought it was interesting that one of the women who works there, she's the one who takes in the bodies and she freezes them. She hasn't signed up to be frozen and reanimated 2,000 years from now because she said that life is hard and she's not sure if she does want to come back. And so I thought there was a lot more thought there than just people going, technology will save us, because I'm not sure it will. I really enjoyed going there and I'm glad I did.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a 50-50 chance that the world is going to be in a better place in 2,000 years, or the world will be an absolute shithole.
I think you're being generous with 50-50.
Well, yeah, because, I forget who said it, but it was something to the effect of, World War III is going to be fought with the nukes, and World War IV is going to be sticks and stones.
Yeah.
and I think, in 2,000 years that we may have gotten past like World War X.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I wouldn't want to imagine what. Yeah.
It'll be Mad Max Fury Road. It'll just be about water. I think.
Right. Yeah. Golly. Well, I'd love to do a bit of a lightning round before we wrap up the interview, Hayley. If you could give a TEDx talk about end of life, what would the one subject be? If you could get a whole bunch of people who are not comfortable with the ideas presented in this book, what would be the one thing?
Well, with a TEDx talk, you're pushing your own views. So I think it would be definitely about being around dead bodies and dressing them. And there was another thing that Poppy told me. She really wanted to bring children into her mortuary so that she could show them dead bodies and give them a chance to separate the shock of seeing death for the first time from the shock of grief. And I think that is quietly revolutionary. And I really wonder if I ever would have written this book, if I had met her as a curious little 7-year-old and she had shown me a dead body and said, this is what it's like. It's nothing, it's just this quiet, sad sight. It's nothing. It's not this huge thing you've built it up to be. I think that kind of thing is life-changing. So I'd talk about that.
What's the last book you read that has nothing to do with death? And what are you
Werner
currently
Herz-
reading?
The last book I read that had nothing to do with death was Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, which is great. And the one I'm currently reading is Werner Herzog's debut novel, The Twilight World, which I am loving. It's about the Japanese soldiers who stayed in the jungle after the war and refused to accept that the war was over.
I read a quick little thing about them and the subtle art of not giving a fuck, and was like, wow, they really thought that. Okay.
They really gave a fuck. They were committed.
I mean, that's wow. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Yeah. But the book is
God.
great. It's great writing, and you don't even have to read it in your head in Werner Herzog's voice, although that does help.
Going back to Rebecca, is the book better than the movie? Because I love the movie.
Yeah, I really love the book. It's I would say yeah.
Okay.
It's really dark and strange, and I love it.
All right. I'm going to do it. I've been on the fence with this, me and my 16-year-old, because I'm like, okay, I love the movie, and it's been something that we've rewatched on occasion. It's between that and Fight Club. I know, I'm weird. Sorry. Yeah,
it's a good movie.
Yeah,
I think the movie of Fight Club is better than the book.
No,
no, I do.
I'm leaving. The headphones are off. I'm walking out.
No.
How dare you?
The book reads like a treatment for film. Was my thing.
Okay.
I
feel like there were parts of the book there were scenes in the book that should have been in the movie, like the scene with the lady in the party with the perfume bottles.
I don't remember this scene. I read it when I was 15. So
yeah, it was Tyler left a note in her expensive perfume collection, and it was something to the effect of, I may or may not have pissed in one of these bottles of expensive perfume.
But the thing is, perfume is made of like piss and stuff from the anal glands of like weird cats and the belly of whales. Perfume is made of disgusting stuff. Human piss is no worse.
I'm isolating just this little thing right here, and I'm going to play it for my wife and my kids. That is great. What is your favorite place to write, and how did any of the stories or ideas in the book you wrote impact that place?
I write in my flat. I have tried to write in fancy places, the British Museum where people go to write their novels. I've tried to write in, far-flung rented holiday houses by the sea. And what happens in all of those places is I stare out the window or I stare at people around me and I get nothing done. So the only way I can get work done is sitting in my flat where there's nothing interesting around me. I don't have any stories that have influenced that in any way. What a boring answer, but truthful. I'm sorry.
No, nothing to be sorry for. Who handles death better, the UK or the US?
We're both as fucked up as each other, I think.
All right, fair enough. This is Freddie's Huge Ask podcast. What is your huge ask for readers of All the Living and the Dead?
Read it all the way to the end. Don't skim anything, because there are so many little things to take away. And I'm frightened that people might go, I'm not reading that chapter because, I'm squeamish or it might upset me. I think the point is to try and challenge yourself. So just try it.
And it'll be a challenge that you won't regret when you accept it.
Well, I can't say that, but you can.
No, I'm telling you, this book, do it. Accept the challenge. I challenge you. Hayley challenges you. All the Living and the Dead. Check her out on the web, y'all. Hayley, Hayley. So Hayley Campbell. freddyshuge.com. Look her up on Twitter and on Insta. And really appreciate you coming by the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to Freddie's Huge Ask podcast.